Right, today's video, getting on down the list now. I think we're on, I can't remember. Anyway, what I didn't ask much about DNA, but it came up in the conversations. So, and I said, basically, did a being create us? And unfortunately not. This is all, everything you see in these DNA strands can be broken down back to the elements, basically. I think somebody said in our bodies there's enough water to boil so many potatoes, there's enough carbon to make so many pencils, and basically that's what we are. Now, in order to get it, I'm not going to talk about planetary system because that comes later, but basically it's very, very difficult to start off a DNA chain. As you know, you have to have a planet where water can turn to a gas and to a solid. So that leaves a very small window in every solar system, depending on the heat of the sun and the amount of radiation. If you've got a metallic core, that stops the radiation coming to a certain extent, because radiation coming from the sun goes round the magnetic field. The planet's got to be big enough to do that. Too big and it doesn't really have any effect. As far as, no, it's probably not right, but there was something they said about a big planet that didn't meant we couldn't live on it, except if we had gone there of our own accord. Rocky planets seem to do better, and at some stage in the operation a rocky planet doesn't have much water, so you have to be hit by an asteroid containing a vast amount of water, which is where our seas come from, obviously. So everything has to be dead right, and then you have to pass every element past in the right order, past the next atom that you need, and the next one, and the next one, till you get simple chain of basically everything builds up. You know, everything starts off as atoms, comes down as gets all brought together as a planet. All the elements have to be here. That's another problem to start off life. Temperature has to be right, no radiation, plenty of water, and then to sit there, then it needs something to stir it to be quicker. Our moon creates the tidal system, and obviously wind and rain. You know, the more you can stir up your soup, the better, and then elements will start passing each other and will start adding together, and you'll get complex molecules. You need that to start with. So anyway, everything builds up and builds up and builds up until you've got to where we are here, sitting here like this. So no, I'm afraid there was no creator as such. You know, it can all be proven scientifically. I'm not sure whether we've got there or not, but we will. And then one of the groups of information passed to relevant planets is all about DNA. Now DNA pretty well does exactly the same thing on nearly every planet where it's developed. The only difference is, obviously, fish grow gills because they live in the sea, and we grow lungs because we live in the air, and all that. That's the only differences. But you can see, just by looking at this planet, how many different species there are. And some of the ugliest things in the world are some of the prettiest things in the world. You know, I'm not talking about humans. I would do that. Nobody's ugly, except me. No, I don't know. But anyway, so that's basically the building blocks. Now eventually they'll give us any information we haven't got, we haven't decided for ourselves already, because DNA is quite important, because eventually it won't be able to cope. Viruses develop much quicker than larger organisms. There's lots of things we need to change. You can, in our bodies as we stand here, there's a lot of stuff that we don't need anymore. Like, for instance, somebody said that a fetus, at very, very early stages, grows gill slots where we used to be a fish. And we don't need that. So, it goes away after a while, but we don't need it to even start. We need to slimline our genetics down to what we need. And that's it. Because eventually, as we see, genetics can make you susceptible to different diseases as well. So we need to know who to mix with who. This is if we don't want to do it in the lab. Who to mix with who to get the best possible results. I think Hitler tried it with the Armenians, or what is it? Not Armenians. Can't remember. Tall, big fellas anyway. And he basically wanted to do away with even himself and his own genetic pool, and build up this new, I think they were Armenians, Armenian race, or Aryan race. That's it, the Aryans. So he'd already tried, but you either battle the diseases, or you DNA yourselves away from them. And that can only be done if you don't want to do it in the lab, which is, there's a lot of problems with the lab, because you can it's a bit sort of, if you look at stuff under the microscope, what we've done is dead rough compared to what nature's done, basically. So you'll always get problems like synthetic hormones. It's like putting a really big drill in a really little hole. It's a bit sort of really rough. Anyway, so DNA. Now, on the mothership, that contains a DNA processor. As I said before, I was under the impression that it said that these only come from, there's only one planet that can make them, because they've been around a lot longer than the rest of the people. That's the one I was talking about, was out the front. And because that's quite nearby to a lot of planets which produce motherships, one went out on each one. And occasionally, not on the one I was talking to, I don't think, because I can only see the one unit in the diagrams, occasionally they send out 2 or 3, and if they meet up with a mothership that hasn't got one, they put one on board, because it's been proven that they're quite needed. Now, to give you, I was asking a lot about the Bible and all that, and did any of it ever happen or exist? And apart from the fact that the knowledge they've got basically says it was all just stories, nice stories that were elaborated. Each time they were told by somebody else, they were elaborated. So, but they're thinking that a ship a long way out, mothership, saw the fact that we were getting a bit savage and things were going downhill, basically, that they sent a ship here to do something about it. In other words, change our course a bit. This is in the religion section, so I'm not going to, but I'm just going to do the DNA bit. So what they did, they artificially inseminated Mary, basically, and produced a child that they could bring up and teach to go out and try and change people's attitudes basically. Now that worked, you know, because here we are still thinking that there's a God and all that. But there's no God. That was made up. That was made up because if a man's standing in front of you, you can't see, you know, he looks, you know, if you had a sword, you could just go like that and he's finished. But if he said to you, oh, there's a God, he's all around us, he will send you to hell, you will rot in with fire and eternal damnation, all that, you're going to think twice. That's why the first thinkers, because there's been 4,000 gods, none have ever appeared. You know, we worship the sun, we worship the ground, we worship air, everything has been worshipped at some stage. And that's why, another reason why you don't get spaceships arriving. Okay, now we know that we'd know they were from another planet and we'd say hello and all that. But in the olden days, if they saw that land, they would think you were a god. So that's the end of that. The DNA side of it, obviously Mary, artificial insemination, and then about 50 odd years out, the DNA producer produced 3 DNA subjects of what they thought we looked like. They got sort of a lot of information from the past, from this planet. Unfortunately, they didn't get the progression right of how we progressed. They thought we still had hair and looked like apes. So they produced 3 sort of not completely ape looking, but a bit like something less hairy than, I did sort of get a quick picture, a bit like a caveman, but not so much hair, but they still had the big. Anyway, when they realised they'd made this mistake, they put clothing on them. Now this was to make sure that this baby that had just been born, that they were going to nurture into a being that could sort out the planet, had the right stuff. Now we think it's gold, frankincense and myrrh, I think it was in the Bible, but they weren't. Might have been some gold, but we certainly never heard about him spending it. But the other things were things like vitamins and brain food, you know, stuff that would help grow him up. So that was that. So that's the DNA side of it. They produced these 3 beings, didn't look anything like humans when they got here, so they put crowns on them and masks, and they were called the 3 Kings of Orient are, but nobody ever actually knows. 3 Kings from the Orient. This song goes, 3 Kings from Orient are, or whatever. But anyway, that's what happened. The Star of David that they keep talking about was actually the ship following them. They said there was a star following them to guide them. Well, actually, that was also a probe, or a mothership. Nobody knows. They just saw it as a white light. It had a tail. Some people say it was a comet, but I'm telling you, it was a spaceship. And I think when he got to a certain age, these fellas just up and went, but they did help him with his miracles. And one very simple one was cataract operations. They would have taken them to the mothership somehow in a probe, put them on, because this time the motherships weren't long and thin, they came later. Although there might have been some about, this particular one wasn't. This was a big round thing. Take him up there, do the cataract operations. In the morning he can see. So Jesus turns up, sort of gathers everybody round, goes like that on his eyes. Next thing you know, voila, he can see. A lot of things like that. You know, I think things like when he gave out the fishes, that could be to fed the 40,000, was it, or fed the 1,000 or something. I didn't really pay attention at school, But I do remember some of these nice stories where he produced enough fish and bread for God knows how many people. That could be done. You know, there's lots. If you go through the Bible, you can check out all these stories and how they could be done. Was it Moses with the water that parted while they went across the lake? That could be done. There's so many things. So that's, you know, what they would use DNA for, and people right up till the present day have seen what they call, well, they've even specified what they are now, alien greys, and all this. Anyway, that's basically what's produced, and they're only produced just to, obviously, you can't take them with you, because another 10 or 20 years, even if they lasted 200 years, you know, you'd only be a microscopic distance into your journey compared to some of the journeys these things do. So the mothership will travel with no beings on board that it knows about, that is, but there are exceptions. So yeah, so that's the DNA side of it. Like I say, we've got to get the hang of it. I know we've mapped the whole genetic system, so we know what they all do, and people are grabbing bits of that, and you know, some of the DNA based drugs are going to be terrific. There's no doubt about that. You'll be able to fix various parts of your body. You'll be able to grow new teeth, grow new legs, all sorts of things. There's lots of things that can be done. And as you can see, there's a DNA strand. There's the spiral effect, and you can see how incredibly complicated that is. That's an electron micrograph, I think. And I've got a feeling that distance there is a micron. Very, very small amount of space. So that's about a micron of DNA. Very, very complicated. But, you know, it grows itself. Therefore, you can grow it. You can't get in there with metal instruments and change it, although I expect people have tried. Growing it will be the easiest way. So that's that. And DNA comes in later with the country system. I'll go into it just a little bit because DNA is quite an easy thing, and we've only done 47 minutes. So I'll go into it a little bit, but I'm going to cover it in greater detail when I do the country system. At the moment, what happens is, we're born in England 75,000 years ago, or quite a few thousand years ago. There was actually nobody here. The North Sea wasn't there. There was a population, Doggerland was it? Population in the living where the North Sea now is, because they found the settlements under the sea. So, you know, really, I am a citizen of the UK, and I'm sitting on the UK, and I'm saying, this is my country. I'm waving my flag, which, yes, very, very, very nice, very great thing to do, very noble. But in fact, you had no choice whether you were born here or not. Your mum and dad produced you, and there you were, born in England, whether you like it or not. Okay, you grew up here, and you've worked here, and you've built up the country and all that, you know. But basically, you, as a human being born on this planet, you should actually be allowed anywhere. Doesn't matter whether you're pink, white, transparent, brown. It doesn't matter. You know, you are really allowed to go anywhere. And what we've got to sort out is, okay, in early development of a planet, some countries rocket higher than others, normally because they've pinched their resources. Now, we've had an ice age whereby humans were squashed back to what is now the biggest part of Africa, Ethiopians. And in that time, before that, we were like Ethiopians. We were tall and thin, didn't need to produce any fat because the food was there. You stood up, picked something off a tree and ate it. Now that was what the world was like before the last ice age. The ice age has actually caused us to eat animals because there was no veg, but we are generally vegetarian. We had a huge appendix, which is there's a huge appendix in rabbits because they only eat grass and stuff. We had a big one. No, we've only got about that big now, and that gets something caught in it and goes bad, and then you have to get rid of it. Now that gives you some idea that years ago we only ever ate vegetation. And it's because of either Yellowstone, Krakatoa, being hit by meteorites and stuff, that's put stuff in the air, that's killed all the vegetation, and there's only animals left, so we had to eat animals. Yeah, so we all came from Africa, that's what I'm saying. We only developed fat because when, for instance, in a caveman type situation where the women stay at home, the men all went out hunting. Now they might not catch something for 2 weeks, so you had to have a fat storage system. So as soon as the animal was caught and came back, everyone gouged themselves and all laid about asleep, but stored the fat because food was few and far between. But Ethiopians, tall and thin, reached up, just picked fruit, picked vegetables, lived like that, which was how most of the world lived before the last ice age, apparently. So the DNA side of it, yeah. So what I'm saying is, I had my DNA done, and there's nothing really spectacular there, I'm afraid. I came from East Anglia, and the thing is, see, they don't go back very far. If there's no one here 75,000 years ago, we must have originated from somewhere else. So, but DNA is going to come into it because the very British bulldog-looking chap says, no, I like England, I don't want anyone else here, it's my country, and all this. But in fact, there was one chap who, if you look on YouTube and watch all the DNA stories, there was one chap who said, oh, my dad hated the Germans and his grandfather before that was killed in the First World War. And we hate the Germans. Turned out to be 20% German. He was devastated. So you never know. You don't know who. We're all from all around the world. So in order to be the person and stay in a group, you have to all get your DNA done, which which we'll see when we get to the mobile device. Your DNA is put on your mobile device and given to your mum and dad the day you're born on most planets. And that DNA number generated from that could be 5 miles long with our numbering writing. That all goes on the machine. You'd never have to remember it or anything. In fact, that's the only number that they use. You don't have, here we've got bank account, we've got national insurance number, we've got thousands of numbers, thousands of credit card numbers. We are basically a bunch of numbers with a little name. We don't really want that. But when the money system comes up, you'll see that all that's irrelevant, we don't need it. So DNA basically, that goes on the mobile device, and then automatically the whole system knows what you're susceptible to, what you should and shouldn't eat, because remember, we've come from different parts of the world that had different diets, and some have become intolerant to, say for instance, if peanuts were never grown in one particular area, and a lot of people came from that area and suddenly started eating peanuts, it's not going to agree with them, is it? So we've all come from different places, all got different allergies, so that's that sorts that out, but I'll do that later. Now you might think, well, I don't want anyone to know my DNA, but nobody does. Only the system knows it. Your mobile, basically. But the benefits from it are like 500 times the fact that somebody might one day know your DNA, but they'd never learn it anyway. They never learn the number. If they've managed to get it off your machine, it's just a massive series of numbers. Nobody can use it because it's logged to you. You know, everyone knows exactly. You know, everyone's the same. So anyway, the DNA. Yeah, if that's logged and put on your mobile, then you get to know exactly who all your ancestors are. Now mine are in Tasmania, I think it was Norway, Sweden, a lot of East Anglia, Wales and Northern Ireland came into it, which is where the Vikings came round. They used to attack in that way, because we had all this coastline all defended. So, and they you know, I mean, Wales has got an incredible history of being taken over by virtually everybody. They're still complaining about the English. So basically, that's it. So DNA, that's DNA for you. I think we're nearly there. 26, yeah. So DNA, yeah, basically we need to get a handle on that. It wasn't produced by God. It's just what happens when all the right ingredients and all the right circumstances, should I say, are all on the planet. Now, like I say, we all know there's literally millions of planets. There's millions of stars out there, billions of stars. So there must be trillions and even more planets. Don't ever tell me that none of them have got people on. You know, don't stand there and say, oh no, we're a one-off. No. You know, I think this system knew there was 50,000 odd planets at a bacteria level that could become beings. I know of 450 planets that are on the system. Think of all the ones that aren't. You know, but as you say, it is very difficult to get to that point where a planet's ready to produce simple molecules that could produce life. So I think we're at the end. 28, yeah. Right, next, I'm not sure what the next one is, but I'm going to try and do it tomorrow. Okay, thanks a lot.